You'll have noticed in this play is how powerful navies are. A large part of that is because there's no restriction. You're allowed to move navies without a leader, as far as I can tell. I believe that's actually specified in the Q&A somewhere, but I haven't written it in. But only armies need to be picked up and carried. So right at the beginning, you can use your navies to go conquer something, and that's what we see. Now at this point, there is a navy, and it would be held directly by a player, the Hanseatic Pirates card. Now you can buy these suckers at $5 each, but now this one's available cheaper. It shows up here, and the interesting thing about it is, there's things you could raid right away, right? The Duke of York, the Hansa. The problem is those guys each have finally made their $5. By the time we get to the spring naval move combat, well, we've already hit the spring build. So those guys are going to have an army each. So they're no longer pillageable. If this had been a turn previously, that would have enabled someone to sail and grab half the cash, essentially. That's not going to be the case anymore. It does present a potential risk to the English player, but again, he can build up navies or armies to defend himself there. Galleys aren't too useful when you're north of the line, though. You kind of have to ship them down real fast into the Mediterranean before the winter comes, at which point they become a powerful Mediterranean fleet. But I don't know if this is of great interest to anyone except maybe England, who, has a significant number of round ships anyway. Round ships are kind of cool because they don't actually have to be in a port, so they can be immune to other ships, and they also are able to choose which port they're delivering through when you're doing pass-through movement. When you're doing an actual destination, well, you have to go to the destination in that case, regardless of where you are, even if you're a galley somewhere else. Well, I think the English are willing to pay $1 for an extra fleet. Well, not the English, the Portuguese are willing to pay $1 for an extra fleet. They can position it somewhere and use it. I don't know if anybody else is terribly interested in that ship. So, I think they'll pick that sucker up. One question, though, becomes, hey, now that we have armies showing up with some of these other player groups, what's available that's of interest? The Dauphin, he could go seize, say, a Churchlands area and take some taxation away from the papacy. I don't know if that's worth investing $1 into doing. And that's kind of the problem. These guys aren't really serving any great purpose. If they get taken under control by someone, it's conceivable they could launch a threat against either the French or the Habsburgs. But that threat can be counteracted. Empires have a large war chest always in the early stages of the game. That decreases. So there's just not a lot of interest in picking one of those up. So we're going to move on to that build. After purchases, a lot of the mercenaries have gone out. I forgot to charge him the winter fees. He had 2 here. Now he has 3, actually. I paid the extra 1 that he would have owed. He's going to owe 2 a year now to maintain those. But right now he's got a nice flow of income. If that shifts over to here, for some reason, is the Tsar, who's currently the main source of silk. If that somehow shifts a little bit south to Trebizond, well, he's got a big enough army he can go take Trebizond and gain the cash that way as well. And in fact, Trebizond's more worthwhile to him in terms of taxation. It's just, it doesn't make sense to leave something open because then it will no longer generate cash for him. He's less important than a player position such as the Basilius, because the cash isn't going straight into a player's treasury. It's going to the Muscovite prince, who's becoming a more and more powerful leader. A lot of the controlled or not controlled stuff. Well, all the not controlled stuff bought armies. A lot of the controlled stuff did too. Indeed, some of the players did. The Athenian prince blew $5 of his money for this. He's just too vulnerable without an army there. He's still pretty vulnerable to, like, if the Pope's navy decides to intervene and knock someone out, they can. One kind of nice thing, the Pope himself is controlled by the Mamluks. Yeah, that's kind of a joke. So the Mamluks, they are considering the possibility of actually moving out and moving across sea, and basically you just walk on water where you have applicable naval assets, and he has 10 movement points. 5 if he's with armies. He can then pick up this army which he convinced the Chancellor to build with the, hey, we may need our navies to defend our interests. Let's make sure we have an army, not only an extra one in Rome so I can grab the Medici territory, because there's currently an edifice there that we want under the auspice of the empire. But we just have so much cash coming in that even after building, say, an extra one in Bologna, etc., he's being very nice, the Chancellor is, in terms of providing stuff for the emperor. What he hadn't done is buying a lot of caravans. In a sense, he probably should, as a means of going around the imperial, the papal navies. Right now, he's not taking that step, but there's a problem. The Habsburgs are almost to the point where they can do so. They actually bought enough caravans that they can reach Jettison, which means if they had access to that, and they do actually have access to here, and they could reach here, they could use English round ships and then Habsburg forces, caravans to transport stuff, but only as far as Milan. I don't have enough caravans to get me any further south, so there's no real deal in place here. There is the possibility, though, of the Habsburgs saying, look, I'll move the money through the papal navies here and here, and then I'm going to take it by land, and I'm going to collect money in, Wallachia and Hungary, and in territories that I control, rather than giving all that excess cash to your empire. I'd rather give it to my little kingdoms or duchies or whatever. So that's kind of the goal there. Meanwhile, the French are also expanding theirs. So actually, there may be the possibility, at least temporarily, of the French hooking that up completely, so that the money doesn't have to go to the papacy at all. And if that's the case, well, giving cash to the Byzantines seems safer than giving it to that kind of unholy alliance, if it comes down to that. Of course, the unholy alliance could agree to carry their stuff for free. And then it comes down to whether or not you want to pay that bribe. Because the bribes come from your own cash, and that's the problem there. So, I guess we're up to revealing the summer card. And it's an M1, a kidnapper. Player gets to take an opponent or leader held by an opponent and attempt to kidnap him. You get a chance of imprisoning. The player, it's only on a 1. Other leaders or emperors on a 1 through 3. It can also be used against C and M cards. And of course, you can murder them after you imprison them. So this is actually better than an assassin even. It's a powerful card available here. In particular powerful against something like this. Just as it's played, you can try to kidnap the person and then prevent it from being executed. So that's probably going to go for a little bit, not like the last one did. And then we have the taxation, which is still present. As I finished up the taxes, something came to my mind. So we got the French king here visiting the Duke of Burgundy. He's going to want to move out of there. He collected taxes this turn. He walked in there and took the money last turn. There was no defense. He took half the cash for the... But it's almost like making this royal progression, right? If he goes and visits people as they collect their money and leaves them in charge to keep collecting taxes, that works better. Now, as we leave, when we hit that 1466 turn, that all changes. You're no longer interested in visiting people as they collect their cash on this royal progression. That no longer matters. All you're interested in, there is no longer that automated taxation. So it's important that people get troops, and right now the Dauphin and Burgundy do not have troops, whereas, say, actually the Dauphin does. He's immune too. So a lot of the leaders out there are now with forces so that they can't easily be dealt with. One thing about the Mamluk here, I may want to just grab this troop and bring it back with me. As long as it's under my command, I'm okay. I should have been stacked with this navy. It was foolish for me not to, because that reduced my taxes and gave additional taxes to the rest of the empire, to the papacy. Now we're at advanced immature projects, and let's see what we got here. We got the explorers here. The English can keep paying for that. And we're going to have to roll on the discovery table for that. I'll get to that in a moment. I want to deal with any other immature projects I have. Lyonnaise, the French. Oops, I took that money from the player. That money should be coming off the English treasury. I hope I haven't done that before. Just because it's easier. Here the French are going to pay for the Lyonnaise press. That's $3. That goes up, and in Lyon we will be getting, that is an edifice right here, and that becomes an important place to defend now. In particular, eventually it's going to be one of the few places with taxes, but also if it gets, right now spices are the only thing, but if it gets spices, it's producing $3 a turn for the player, which is a reason to try to hook that up. That player, though, is also interested in this route, so he may want to use his French caravans to try to hook this up and pay the bill for the naval action down to the Mamluks. Even though that gives a lot of money to enemies, it only gives one to the actual enemy players. It just gives money to some of the enemy empires, which, again, it's a different kind of thing. All right, let's look at that Voyage of Discovery. It must be important because it's in the winning the game section. So I guess we roll a die, and we don't have any modifiers on here. There's a possibility of a 0 because you can get a -1 from certain actions. He gets a 5. That's not good. Scurvy, 1 ship lost. Voyage continues. Roll again next immature card round. I think it stays out here. All the money's been paid on it. But 1 ship is lost. I'm going to choose to lose one of my damaged ships. But the chances are getting reduced as we go. And that's going to move us to the summer move conflict, and I think that's a good time for me to take a little bit of a break. Now that all the nest eggs are kind of in place and people have troops and such not in place, the white sheep happens to be under the Byzantine Basileus. We get first move because we have this kidnapper. We're marching in. We're going to try to arrest the Mamluk Emperor. Is that a end of game thing? No, there's 1 heir available. But remember, if you come back to the game without being married, your heir is illegitimate, and that causes some discarding and some problems. Secondly, if you only have 1 heir, the next time you die, you're out of the game. This is a pretty brutal blow, but this guy lost quite a bit in his play. So let's see. we're going to roll 2 dice for attack. If we get 1 hit, we capture him. If we get 2 or more hits, we kill him. We missed, so he escapes. Now, if he had armies with him and we had killed the armies, that would be a different situation. But now he gets to slip away and get out of there, which is kind of a shame. Now, I've still got the French forces to move. I'm going to keep them stacked here. That could be kind of dangerous, though, because the papacy is probably going to move against this now. There doesn't seem to be any kind of mass uprising against the papal power. The Habsburgs spread out and built their trade route, which is going to require papal support, actually. But will move things through their own territory. And it could conceivably require English support if I move to here. This is what I was talking about. English can ship me there. That gives me 2 different options, actually. Okay. So now we're right at the Pope, and he's about to unleash hell, I'm assuming, on this fella. Now, I'm not sure just what he can do. He could trash these French things, whatever. So I'm going to try to kidnap the Pope himself. On a 1, 2, or 3, I succeed in that. Yes! I don't know what that means. But it does have the ability to shake the world up. I believe he still has the Pope's card and can still move papal forces. But now there's the, I'm going to execute the Pope and throw everything into chaos. Among other things, the Pope's heir becomes available as a possibility. Is there anyone with a white alignment? Venice could conceivably become the next Pope. He's permanently disaligned with the papacy, but I believe he's still able to stand for office as the Pope. This guy can't. We've got some secondary options over there. It could throw things into a bunch of chaos if the Pope himself is not available. And now the question is, okay, what do we do? What do we do here? As the person who holds most of his power through the papacy, who's really almost at mercy without it, it's going to be a tough call. I'm not sure what to do. Looking at the board situation, it looks like the Pope's heir would be the next Pope. Unfortunately, there is no Pope's heir. Interesting. The next best contender. Who could it be? This guy has 1 vote essentially with the Curia that he can throw into his contender. It's actually only available to his own dude. His own dude would have 1 vote for the papacy because of that. No one else is available. Over here, and remember, this is the most powerful position in the game, right? Over here, we have the Duke of Milan, who gets 1 for level 3. Or he could take one of these people who have 1 for a titular claim to the throne. So again, we have people with a 1 claim. Over here, he's got a 1 claim at best. The Sultan actually can be made Pope. There doesn't seem to be any restriction to that, unless I do not see any rule which restricts that. I'm somewhat disgusted by that and don't think it should be possible, but there's a lot of things in this game that don't feel possible, and to tell you the truth, if the Sultan's pulling the strings here, you could have some kind of weird unification between the Catholic Church and the Caliphate, or the Sultanate of Egypt. So, hey, why not? As long as I can wave my hands around a little bit, why not? He's level 3 and could go for it. The Grand Prince of Moscow could, of course, go for it. We've got a lot of people with one vote. So, what other things could possibly count here? No one has any of the others except perhaps the most armies in the empire. Does anyone control any armies in what's officially seen as the Papal Empire other than papal troops? I don't see any. What does that do? Well, ties go to the heir. Further ties go to the person with the most number of armies in the empire. None of that applies. So to me, there's no money or anything like that that gets thrown into this. So to me, it sounds like it's going to be one big, massive, random check of who gets to be the next pope. And it could be all kinds of people. Now, some people would have to renounce their current ties to be it. This guy's essentially out of it anyway. But let's look here. This guy is currently aligned with white, so he could definitely go in on it. Over here, well, I probably don't want to be the Pope. Renouncing my ties to stand for Pope seems unreasonable, but I might be willing to stand the Borgia in there. And then if he wins, I'll essentially get the Pope card and have the choice to renounce the Habsburgs. But I don't think I'm going to be standing with my people, because I think I've got something better than half the papacy. Maybe. I mean, this is the military leader of the papacy. The Doge of Venice, he has nothing that he'd have to renounce. He's forbidden, so he couldn't put the Tsar in place without putting the Pope up for bidding, essentially, and losing his Tsar. But I think he can stand on his own as an equal holder. So now we have two. We have the third one here with the Sultan. And yeah, the Basilius could give up his French power, and that would certainly, I think, be worthwhile for him to do. It might not be worth it for the Habsburgs. I think they're of an interesting position, but I think his connection to the French is too distant to be worthwhile. So we've got something like 4 people who might make this worthwhile. Now, of course, he's got to give it up before he can even stand, so he may not want to do that. So we've got 3 different players who can hold this without a problem. I don't think a 1 in 4 chance is worth it. I think if he had the guarantee, he would definitely be happy with it, but he doesn't. So then now the question comes, well, what can I bribe him with? What can I give him in exchange for the life of my Pope that I really need? I could promise him free transit for some period of time. Free transit would be actually quite valuable to him, because he has potentially 2 different things to fuel here between those 2. Of course, that kind of breaks the deal with this guy. This guy's counting on half the money from all these players, and he's not getting that. At some point or another, I'm going to have to write down all these agreements that are made, that are, the agreements as they start to be made, because they're starting to get complicated here. Yeah. Well, we'll see what I settle in some die rolling and I started writing down long-term agreements, the Athens-Egypt agreement, where they're going to share the papal trade income equally. And that's in conflict with this Egyptian-Byzantine Basilius's agreement, which is that there'll be no fees on papal trade through 1466. Now, obviously, that's not going to include any caravans that get built, but the naval trade, there's not going to be any fees. Now, how the Curia decides to assess this against the Pope is up to him. But the Pope was released after movement. We'll put him back in Rome. Just because that's such a dangerous factor, but he probably wasn't going to gain from it. Someone else gets the papacy. And it could well be the guy with the Curia, and that would be a real conglomeration of power that's just too great. So this kind of deal seemed the best. Now he's kind of squawking his noise about it. He's not happy with this deal. He's like, just pay him some gold, You're going to owe me for this. And this may be the break between them. We also see the French hooking up Lyon here. Dauphin's kind of an interesting territory with connection to a couple of cities. So that kind of helps. And the French king went back here to grab another unit and move him somewhere else to add to his tax base over the next turn. So we've got actually a French and a Habsburg chain going here. And the Habsburg chain's important because it links up with the English boats here and here. And the English and the Habsburgs made an agreement to both supply each other for free. They're going to run their chain. They're going to hit their two banks. Oh, that's not the English bank. The English bank is down here. So I don't know what to do with these boats here. I'll just kick them around. They're not at any danger. Nobody else has round ships. So yeah, we're going to be able to get money to the English bank and to the Habsburgs without having to cut any deals that are further. The English need the Habsburg chain to get there. Now that creates something interesting. I'm done with the movement. That creates something interesting which we can look at during the trade phase. It's possible that the papal route will undercut one or both of these. And then they can say, okay, I'm not going to charge a fee. It's open to you. And what that means is that that route has to take the shortest route because there's this, you have to go with the lowest of fees possible, given that the routes are available to you. We also see the French willing to buy into this. They need an English fleet, and they'll be paying $1 probably to the English to give them their supplies through here. Alternatively, they could instead be paying the papacy, but they'd rather help the English-Portuguese player out there and move there. In the long run, though, they're going to have to send a significant amount of these caravans down this way. They do have to pay the papacy if they want the route coming up here with the spices that they also desire. The papacy is willing, however, to give them a free route, which means I actually don't have to pay the English. I can just pay the papacy, and we'll just see what the shortest route is. It'll probably be the land route to here. So I'm going to get free transit for 2 routes, which is really, I think this guy's going to demand $1 a turn to cover that, because that's money he should be getting a share of. And he feels like the ransom of the Pope is not a reasonable reason that he should be paying off and losing funding. That may come to a major disagreement, though. So now we're at the fall card. Well, let's see what we get. Not sure if I want to do this right away. An almanac. This is going to subtract 1 from discovery rolls. This is particularly interesting to the English because they currently are undergoing discovery. Yes, it may seem a little weird. How'd that get here? Well, I don't know. Sometimes these voyages of discovery are multiple trips, historically, but this is only a year. Many of these took several years, so it does feel a little weird to just buy that. But again, I think if you try to read too much into this game and add too much sanity to it, you're going to spend your whole game trying to make up new rules for that. Is anyone else terribly interested in this card? Yeah, maybe. There are other people who may be intrigued by the idea of building round ships. So I'm going to just make some quick rolls. The Pope's going to bid a buck on it. And the English go to 2. And I don't see anyone going higher than that. They'll pick that up, and I'll put that over here so that I can remember that bonus. Now, is there anything else that anyone would want to buy at this point in the game? I don't think so. There is some threat to disrupting these caravan lines. I think the Pope trying to disrupt the French line would be an abrogation of their deal. However, attempting to disrupt the Habsburg line would make sense, but it's too late right now. We're on the trade routes phase. So in particular, let's see if the papacy can undercut this route in terms of payments. This is going to pay coming out of this space. Well, no, this one gets paid there. So it's going to pay 1, 2, no payment here because there's no city there. 3, we're looking at the let's look at the English first. 4, it's going to be 4 to here with the English route. Now with theirs, they come through with 1, 2, 3, 4. They're not going to make it far enough. So no matter what, they're not going to be able to beat the route that the English set up. And basically, if the English are willing to supply the French caravan, that's going to also be, I think, the cheaper route. Let's see. The English take me to here. Well, those are equivalent arguments, so that doesn't really help. So that's kind of what I want to do anyway. I don't want to take this route, but let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to here. That doesn't get me a land route unless the Habsburgs were to help it. So that doesn't help. So we'd be going here 1, 2, 3, 4. Venice probably would give free passage just to get the extra gold in the transit, because they're not guaranteed to get the gold coming through here. That could go to the papacy. Alternatively, that's going to cost 1, 2, blank, 3. It actually looks like the land route's going to be cheaper no matter what. So there isn't a lot that can be done there either. So I think all the routes are connected and are going to work. It's just a matter of trying to figure out if anybody can kind of get a jump on one of these and decrease its decrease how much it pays out to improve it. So, I mean, the French are going to get free treatment by the papacy through the Black Sea, and they're also going to get free treatment for the stuff that comes out of Egypt, the spices that come out of Egypt going up to the Comnenid. All right, well, I'm going to drop all the money for the routes. I don't want to do this in detail. I have my own ways of doing it that speed things up. You got to see some in detail in the earlier videos. Just realize the money is getting spread all over the place, and you'll see the effects of it after after when I come back. I'll show where all that cash is piled up. It turned out not to be that unequitable. The money going to the Comnenid French for the release of the Pope, that was $2 that they would have transferred. There was only one other buck available, which was Venice tracing all the way down and through. You'll notice everybody threw money at the Pope instead of at Venice. That's because Venice's money goes to the player. The money going to the Pope goes to the Papal States. Now, if some player got elected Pope, that becomes a complex situation, right? The empire still is played and still has a chancellery, so the cash doesn't go directly to that person. If he has both, does it? No, I still don't think so. I still don't think it's considered a personal treasury. I think it's just, he's got sort of this exalted position as the Pope. And actually, in a lot of ways, it's better to almost control a Pope as a puppet than, or an emperor as a puppet, than to actually be one, because you have one less counter under your control. The difficulty, of course, is that the emperor can be taken from you by some cards in a way that your own character can't. We can see a lot of money thrown on the board from transit, the English bank coming down this way, and we've got some fair amounts of cash in people's hands. The Basilicus has made a decent amount of money here, enough that I should probably give him. We're low on coins again. I'm used to just having piles and piles of pennies. That probably wouldn't have worked with this, though. I probably would have needed to break into some other kind of coin anyway. And everywhere else, the pennies are mostly working. I'm a little short, but I think it's okay. Anyway, that money's going to get tucked away. So, for example, here, the Muscovite prince, he just gets his cash. And that's another 5 for him. But that goes under the character. It doesn't go to a player. Here, this goes actually to the Comnenid under his hands. Stuff like this is going to go over to Rome. A lot of this money goes to Rome. And that'll be, of course, converted to more dimes. Over here, well, we got a lot of cash coming through here. There were 3 routes going through here. So now our Wallachians are going to be wealthy enough to have an army soon, which is good, because otherwise someone could just go in there and wreck their day. I'll finish with the rest of the money as I go. Okay, we're ranging towards the end of things here. After movement, what happened was the Duke of Milan actually shifted down and took over Florence. He's level 3, so he's going to get 2 taxation from the Republic of Florence, and later it's more valuable because it has an edifice. Now this is kind of bad news for the Medici. He can buy them. Of course, that may be a step that angers the papacy, and it may move up and attack him for that. They've been avoiding making their movements largely because of all the imbroglio that happened down here. On top of that, the card for the turn, the English shifted their ships. They get some taxation from some North African stuff. That actually goes directly, not to England, but to the Portuguese player, which is kind of potent. Beyond that, we had one more kind of useless card come up, this Guild Textile, or Textile Guild, which is in Ghent. That requires, I believe it's aluminum, and there's none of that on the board yet. We need it, like the mines, we need something to come up for that to make money, and like the mines, the Habsburgs decided they're going to take it. They're in range that if they build an army, they can march out there. They don't want to give up their capital, of course, but they can march out there and end up stationing troops there. It's closer to France and England, but neither of them seemed interested in it. I was willing to throw a buck in. I've got to get troops there, though, or else I won't be able to develop it, nor protect it for that matter. Of course, I could buy something like the Hansa leader or the Dauphin here. Neither of them have a lot of money, but they could help support it and make it a little cheaper to increase if I don't want to buy what I was talking about there. I have the Duke of Anjou. I could actually move him up. He's not doing me any good here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He could make it. He doesn't have any cash to support it, though. But again, at least I wouldn't have to pay for another leader to do that. Now we're on the winter depletions, and at this point the galleys get paid for, and, well, this poor sucker's got to pay his, that's a dime, his excess armies off. I don't think there's anywhere else where I have 2 armies in one location. But I do have to pay for all the galleys. That's mainly an imperial, a papal cost. Everything, I think they have all the galleys on the board, and I'll just count up their number and see what we have. These guys are round ships. And that's it for this year. So this one's going up as soon as I do that. Actually, I was wrong. Venice has a galley still, so they paid $1 out of his personal treasury each turn for that, or each year for that. All right, anyway, up it goes.